I woke up as usual at 5 in the morning. Even after my retirement 6 years ago, the habit of early rising has stayed with me, like so many other things from my former life. My house is still steeped in darkness, and just outside my window the first rays of sunlight are barely breaking through the tree crowns. My house. It's small, one story, with 3 bedrooms and an old-fashioned porch. The house is almost 40 years old, and it hasn't changed significantly since Lizzie and I bought it. A new roof 8 years ago, replacing the plumbing, and painting the facade every 5 years are all the changes. Some of the neighbors had rebuilt their houses beyond recognition, turning modest dwellings into 2-story columned mansions, as if New Carrollton had suddenly opened a branch of the White House. I pulled on my house pants and a t-shirt. There's a robe in the closet, a gift from my daughter last Christmas. Silk, dark blue, monogrammed R.E., Robert Abbott. I only wore it once when Vanessa came over the next day to see if I liked the gift. The robe was beautiful, but seemed out of place in my house, too pretentious. In the kitchen, I put the kettle on and got the oatmeal out. Same motions as yesterday, and the day before, and all the days before that. I could make breakfast with my eyes closed. Lizzie often joked that my life had more rituals than the Catholic Church. Lizzie. It's been 7 years since she's been gone, but I still catch myself talking to her, especially in the mornings. When the house is so quiet, it seems as if she's just stepped out into the garden and is about to return with a bunch of fresh herbs for tea. She would laugh at what was happening to our family now. "Robert," she would say, "you've worked your whole life to provide for them, and they're still not happy." And she'd be right, as always. My daughter Vanessa has changed since she got married. Philip, her husband, works for a large construction company, and they live in what they call here an upscale neighborhood. Big house, 2 cars, vacations twice a year. I don't mind their lifestyle, but what bothers me is how their values have changed. Money has become the measure of everything. I grabbed a cup of tea and walked out onto the porch. My old Ford was parked in the driveway. 17 years together and no problems, except routine maintenance. Vanessa and Philip change cars every 3 years. "Status, Dad," says the daughter. "It's how others perceive you that matters." I've never cared about how others perceive me. Lizzie and I started from scratch. I worked as a chef in 3 restaurants at the same time. She worked as an elementary school teacher. We were saving money on everything to start our own business. When the opportunity arose to buy a small cafe on the outskirts of New Carrollton, we invested all our savings. For the first 2 years, we slept right there in the back on a cot. The cafe turned into a restaurant, and then there was a second, third. Now I have 5 restaurants in and around New Carrollton. Not fast food chains, but real family-run places with good food and atmosphere. I still own a controlling interest, although I handed over operational management to my deputy, Pax Holloway, 5 years ago. But not many people know that. To most of my neighbors, I'm just a retiree, a former restaurateur who gave up his business and now lives on his pension. I've never denied these rumors. I like my privacy, like people to interact with me, not my bank account. Lizzie understood that. She never aspired to luxury, even when we could afford it. "Why do we need a palace when we're happy in a cottage?" she used to say. Our restaurants flourished, but we continued to live modestly. Our only luxury was traveling. Twice a year we went away for a month, studying the culinary traditions of different countries. A phone call interrupted my musings. Vanessa's number. "Good morning, Daddy." Her voice sounded cheerful, too cheerful for 8 in the morning. "Are you up already?" "I get up at 5 o'clock. You know that." "Yeah, your strange habits. Listen, I'm calling to remind you about Lawrence's birthday dinner on Saturday. You remember, don't you?" "Of course I remember. 7 o'clock. 6:30, Dad. And don't be late like last time." I sighed. Last time I was 10 minutes late because of traffic. "I'll be on time." "Also," she faltered, which was unusual for her, "Eleanor made a reservation at Azura. It's a new restaurant downtown, very fancy. There's a dress code." "What does that mean?" "It means you have to wear something decent, not your usual jeans and plaid shirt." "I have a suit," I said. "The brown one you've been wearing to funerals for the last 20 years? I could hear the tiredness in her voice. "Daddy, why don't we go to the mall today? I'll help you pick out something modern." My suit is in perfect order. Eleanor invited her parents and her sister and her husband. They're used to a certain level. I wouldn't want you to look like a poor relative, I finished for her. Dad, don't start. I just want it to go well. Lawrence is turning 30. It's a big date. Lawrence, my only grandson. We were once close, but since he married Eleanor Quinlan 3 years ago, we've seen each other less and less. Eleanor came from a family where outward trappings mattered more than inner content. She worked for a fashion magazine and seemed to judge people solely by their closet and make of car. Okay, I said finally. I'll find something suitable. Thanks, Dad. I could hear the relief in her voice. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? Philip's gonna be late, but we could, not tonight, Vanessa. I have plans. That was a lie. I had no plans except to read a new book and maybe work in the garden. But the thought of spending the evening listening to Vanessa delicately try to hint that my lifestyle was embarrassing her in front of her new friends was unbearable. After breakfast, I set off on my daily walk. 3 kilometers to the park and back, in all kinds of weather. Another habit Lizzie called my stubbornness. The neighbors had grown accustomed to the sight of an elderly man pacing alone at the same time every morning. Returning home, I found a box on the porch. Delivery. I hadn't ordered anything, but I saw Eleanor Abbott's name on the package. Inside was a dark gray suit and a note. Dear Robert, knowing your style, I took the liberty of selecting a suit for you for Lawrence's birthday. I hope it will be to your liking. Best wishes, Eleanor. I took the suit out of the box. Expensive fabric, impeccable cut. It would have cost at least $1,000 if not more. The label said my size. How did she know that? Probably Vanessa. Instead of gratitude, I felt annoyed. This gift wasn't caring, it was an attempt at control. Eleanor wanted me to conform to her ideas of what her husband's grandfather should look like, as if my normal appearance wasn't good enough for their company. I tucked the suit back into the box and carried it into the guest bedroom. Maybe I'd wear it on Saturday, maybe not. It would be my decision, not hers. All day long, my irritation never left me. I tried to distract myself by working in the garden, but my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming dinner. I knew it would be a challenge. Eleanor's parents, Hubert and Beatrice Quinlan, looked at me with ill-concealed condescension every time they met. Her sister Prudence and her husband Quentin were even worse. They barely dignified me with conversation. After lunch, the phone rang. Lawrence's name popped up on the screen. It was unexpected. He usually called only on holidays or when he needed something. Grandpa, hi. His voice sounded uncertain. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? Getting ready for the big day? Yeah, Eleanor's got it all organized. Listen, she said she sent you a costume. Did you get it? I did. So what do you think? I think I could have picked out a suit on my own. There was a pause. Grandfather, no offense. Eleanor meant well. This restaurant is really fancy. The crowd is so big. She just didn't want you to feel out of place. Or do you want me to make you feel out of place? Grandpa, why would you do that? I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Can't we just do without this confrontation? What confrontation? I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. You know, Eleanor says one thing, you do the opposite. She offers to help renovate your house, you refuse. She tells you to change your car to something safer, you ignore it. She gives you expensive clothes, you don't wear them. Lawrence, I've lived 68 years and somehow managed my clothing choices, my car, and the condition of my house without Eleanor's advice. She just cares, grandfather. We all care. I took a deep breath, trying to contain my growing irritation. I appreciate the caring, but caring is respecting another person's choices, even if you don't agree with them. What Eleanor is doing is not caring, but trying to remake me to her liking. All right, Lawrence said after a pause. I don't want to argue, just please come on Saturday. It's important to me. I'll be there, I promised. And I'll congratulate you on your 30th birthday, no matter what suit I'm wearing. After I had talked to Lawrence, I sat in my chair for a long time, looking at the picture of Lizzie on the mantelpiece. She was in her early 50s, standing in our garden, surrounded by the flowers she grew with such love, her smile warm and a little sly, as if she had just thought of a great joke and was about to share it. What would you do, Lizzie? I asked aloud. I knew the answer. She would put on a suit, thankfully, go out to dinner, and charm everyone with her sincerity and intelligence, Lizzie had a knack for finding common ground with anyone. Fight only those battles worth winning, she often said. But was this battle worth it? Maybe I really should have upgraded my closet, changed my car, renovated my house. I could afford it. Money had never been an issue, especially for the last 20 years. It wasn't about money. It was about me not wanting to change just because someone thought my lifestyle wasn't prestigious enough. I had earned the right to live the life I was comfortable with. In the evening, another call came in. This time it was Eleanor. "Robert, good evening." Her voice sounded sweet, too sweet. "Did you receive my gift?" "So, I did, Eleanor, thank you. Does it fit you?" "I haven't tried it on yet." "Oh, you should try it on. I consulted with our magazine's top stylist. This shade of gray is perfect for your type." I held my breath. "That's very sweet of you. I thought you might be more comfortable in your new suit at Azura. It's a very exclusive place. Tables are booked months in advance. We're lucky the manager is a friend of my father's. I'm sure it'll be a wonderful evening." "Oh, absolutely. Mom and Dad are looking forward to seeing you. And Prudence and Quentin are coming too." Quentin was recently promoted to managing director of his company. "Congratulations to him. They have a new house in Chevy Chase, a real mansion. Prudence will show pictures." She was quiet for a moment. "Robert, I've wanted to talk to you about this for a long time. Have you thought about moving? Your neighborhood is not the most prosperous, and this old house needs so much care. Lawrence and I could help you find something more appropriate for your situation. My situation, if she only knew." "Thank you for your concern, Eleanor, but I'm quite happy with my house." "Of course, it's your decision." Her voice has grown cooler. "I'll see you Saturday then. Don't forget, 6:30, Azure." I remember. After the call, I went to the guest bedroom and pulled out the suit. It was really nice. I tried it on. It fit perfectly, like it was tailor-made. For a moment, I imagined showing up in that suit at the restaurant, with the entire Quinlan family looking at me with approval. Then I put the suit back in the box. I went to bed early as usual, but I couldn't sleep for a long time. The upcoming dinner was bothering me more than I wanted to admit, not because of what Eleanor and her family might think of my clothes or my car, but because my own daughter and grandson seemed to share their values. When Vanessa was little, Lizzie and I tried to instill in her the understanding that a person's real value is not in what they have, but in who they are. But now she seems to have forgotten those lessons. Or maybe I'm the one stuck in the past. Maybe the world has changed and I haven't noticed. What would Lizzie say when she saw what our family had become? With these thoughts, I finally fell asleep, thinking about the upcoming dinner and what it would be like. I didn't realize then how unexpected the evening would be for all of us. Saturday morning greeted me with a drizzle, the kind that Lizzie called a New Carrollton drizzle. I stared out the window at the gray sky, feeling vaguely uneasy. Lawrence's birthday, 30 years old. When had my grandson had time to grow up? It seems like only yesterday I was teaching him how to cast a fishing rod at Greenbelt Lake. At breakfast, I was going over my memories of Lawrence, a chubby little boy with dimples in his cheeks who took an indescribable delight in the simplest of things. A bark boat floating on the water, a kite soaring into the sky. An inquisitive boy who bombarded me with questions. A teenager who spent every summer helping me at the restaurant, first on packages, then as an assistant cook. "He's got talent," Lizzie said. "He has a sense of flavors like you." I hoped that someday Lawrence would take over from me, become a successor to the family business. But in college, he got into finance. "There's real money in it, Grandpa," he explained enthusiastically. I didn't mind. Everyone has to choose their own path. But part of me always hoped that one day he would return to his first passion. After college, Lawrence took a job at an investment firm. Good pay, growth prospects. We saw each other less often, but we still kept in touch. Then he met Eleanor Quinlan at some charity event. Beautiful, sophisticated, from a wealthy family. When he brought her to meet him, I saw her glance around my house, and I noticed a fleeting look of disappointment on her face. It disappeared so quickly that I could have written it off as a play of imagination, but I knew exactly what I'd seen. After their marriage, our meetings became even more infrequent and formal. Lawrence now belonged to a different world, a world of country clubs, expensive cars, and social events, where success was measured in square feet of real estate and watch brands. In this world, there was no room for an old man in worn jeans on an old Ford. Vanessa, my daughter, went through a similar transformation. As a child, she was an exact replica of Lizzie, with the same ringing laughter and love of simple pleasures. When we first started the restaurant business and lived in the back of the cafe, she never complained, even though she had to share the cramped space with her parents. "It's like an adventure, Daddy," she used to say, making a shelter for herself out of chairs and tablecloths. After her mother died, she changed. She married Philip Newman, a successful construction company manager, moved to a spacious house in the suburbs, made new friends, changed her car, her style of dress. Sometimes I thought she was trying to erase all reminders of her past, including me. I set the empty teacup aside and looked at the clock. It was almost 10 o'clock. It was a long time until dinner, but the thought of it kept me busy. I remembered the suit Eleanor had given me and felt a pang of irritation. To wear it would be to admit that they were right. Yes, my lifestyle needed adjustment, but not to wear it would provoke another conflict, ruin Lawrence's evening. "What would you do, Lizzie?" I asked the photograph again. Silence in response. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The rain had almost stopped, but the air remained damp and cool. New Carrollton was changing before my eyes. Old family-owned stores were giving way to chain boutiques. Small cafes were being replaced by fancy restaurants. The town was growing, getting richer, but losing its soul. I reached the park where I used to walk with little Lawrence. Not much had changed here, the same paths, the same playground, only the equipment was newer. I sat on a bench and watched the young parents playing with their children. Was I the same with Vanessa? How quickly time flew by. On my way home, I stopped at a flower store and bought a bouquet for Eleanor. White lilies, understated and elegant. A small thing, but perhaps the gesture would show that I was trying. At home, I discovered a text message from Vanessa. "Dad, reminder, 6:30 today. Have you decided what you're going to wear?" I didn't bother to reply. What could I say? That I was still contemplating whether to wear the suit Eleanor had bought or my old one. At 4 o'clock, I started to get ready. I took a shower, shaved thoroughly. I took my brown suit out of the closet and hung it next to Eleanor's gray one. 2 suits, 2 worlds. I'd bought the old suit when Lizzie was still alive. We'd picked it out together for the opening of our 3rd restaurant. "You look like a real boss," she said then, adjusting my tie. I've worn it to every major event since then. Lawrence's graduation, his wedding, and even though the suit wasn't the latest fashion, it held memories. The new suit was impeccable. Modern cut, expensive fabric, perfect fit. A designer piece that was supposed to make me presentable in the eyes of the Quinlan family. I stared at both suits for a long time. Then I slowly took the brown one off the rack and began to dress. The tie I chose was maroon, a gift from Lizzie. When I was fully dressed, I looked at myself in the mirror. There was an older man with a straight back and a stubborn look on his face. The suit fit a little looser than it had before. I'd lost a few pounds in the last few years. But on the whole, I looked decent. Not fancy, but decent. I took the bouquet and my car keys and walked out onto the porch. The sky had cleared and the air smelled fresh from the rain. My old Ford gleamed with moisture as if it had just been washed. I got behind the wheel and stood for a moment, collecting my thoughts. The evening ahead didn't promise to be easy, but I had to get through it for Lawrence's sake. On the drive to Azure, I thought about my family, about how we had gotten to a point where we no longer understood each other. Vanessa was a good girl, a caring daughter. Lawrence was a kind, smart guy. But both of them now lived in a world where values were measured by money and status. A world that was alien to me. I'd never been poor, especially in the last 20 years. My restaurants brought in a steady income, and I'd made some good investments. But I had always maintained that a man was defined not by his money, but by his character, his actions, his attitude toward others. Lizzie shared this philosophy. We lived modestly, not because we could not afford luxury, but because we saw no point in it. For Eleanor and her family, however, the trappings were everything. An expensive car, designer clothes, a house in a prestigious neighborhood. Without it, a person could not be considered successful, could not be accepted into their circle. My old Ford, my simple house, my unfashionable suits made me a loser in their eyes, an object of pity. Eleanor wasn't the only one. In recent years, Vanessa, too, had increasingly looked at me with the same mixture of annoyance and pity. Daddy, you need to update your closet. Daddy, it's time to change your car. Daddy, your house needs fixing. As if my choice to live was simply some defect that needed fixing. Lawrence held himself between two worlds for now. I could see that part of him understood and respected my principles. But the other part was increasingly succumbing to the influence of Eleanor and her family. He had that expression in his eyes now too, a mixture of awkwardness and condescension when I showed up at family events in my normal clothes. As I pulled up to the restaurant, I felt my neck muscles tense. Azure was located in the heart of New Carrollton, in a new glass building that looked like it had been brought straight from Manhattan. The ornate sign glowed neon blue. A string of expensive cars, Mercedes, BMWs, Audis, lined up at the entrance. I parked my old Ford next to a shiny new Lexus. The contrast was stark, like a worn work jacket surrounded by designer coats. A young parking attendant approached my car, gave it a surprised look, but quickly regained a professional expression. "Good evening, sir," he said, opening my door. "Welcome to Azure." I stepped out of the car, feeling the stares of the people standing at the entrance. My old car, my old-fashioned suit clearly stood out against the general gloss. But I straightened my back and headed confidently toward the doors of the restaurant. Inside, Azure was just as I'd imagined it to be, pretentious and pretentious. High ceilings, glass partitions, minimalist furniture that looked stylish but was hardly comfortable. Waiters in black suits glided between tables with an expression of restrained superiority on their faces. The hostess behind the counter, a young woman with perfect posture and flawless makeup, gave me a quick appraising glance. Her eyes had the same expression as the valet's, a mixture of surprise and mild bewilderment. "Good evening," she said in a professionally neutral tone. "What can I do for you?" "I have a reservation for 6:30, Quinlan or Abbott." She looked at the list on her clipboard. "Oh yes, Quinlan. Table for 8. You're the first of your group. Let me show you out." I followed her through the hall, feeling the stares of the customers. There was a certain crowd here, well-groomed, stylishly dressed people with the unmistakable stamp of wealth. I, in my old suit, was like a white crow. The table was at the back of the room, a large round one, set with the kind of care that spoke of high prices. I sat facing the entrance so I could see the other guests arriving. A waiter immediately materialized beside me. "Good evening, sir. Anything to drink while you wait?" "A glass of water, please." He raised an eyebrow slightly as if my choice was unexpected. Most of the customers must have ordered something more refined. But he nodded and left. I placed the bouquet for Eleanor on a nearby chair and waited. It was 6:25. The family was due to arrive any minute. 5 minutes later, Hubert and Beatrice Quinlan, Eleanor's parents, entered the restaurant. Hubert was a tall man with graying temples and a commanding expression. Beatrice was a petite blonde with impeccable styling and a pearl necklace around her neck. They exuded the confidence of people accustomed to luxury. The hostess led them to my table. Beatrice was the first to notice me, and for a split second her smile wavered. "Sonam, Robert," she said, quickly regaining her composure. "You're already here." I stood up to greet her. "Good evening, Beatrice." "Hubert." Hubert held out his hand to shake. His palm was dry and cool. "Robert, good to see you." We exchanged formal courtesies. They sat down across from me, maintaining polite smiles. But I saw Beatrice take a quick, appraising look at my suit. Her eyes rested for a moment on the worn cuffs, and something like compassion flashed in them. It was worse than contempt. "How are you, Robert?" she asked. "Eleanor said you were still living in the same cozy little house." "Yes, nothing has changed," I replied, deliberately ignoring the condescending tone. "That's a remarkable loyalty to tradition," Hubert remarked. "People are so eager for change these days. A new house, a new car, a new life, and you keep things the same. Why change what works?" I said. "Really, why?" Hubert smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Although sometimes an update can't hurt. Beatrice and I recently moved into a new house. Twice the size of the old one, overlooking the lake. Cost a lot of money, but, the quality of life is worth it." "Congratulations," I said. You should come by sometime, Beatrice suggested in a tone that made it clear that it was just a courtesy, not a real invitation. Before I could reply, another couple entered the restaurant: Eleanor's sister, Prudence, and her husband, Quentin. Prudence was a carbon copy of her mother, only younger, with the same expression of restrained superiority on her face. Quentin looked like a typical successful corporate lawyer: expensive suit, perfect haircut, confident gait. The hostess led them to our table. Prudence saw me and gave me a look of joy. "Robert, what a surprise. You're still the same, unchanged." I rose to greet you. "Prudence, Quentin. It's good to see you both." Quentin shook my hand, wrinkling it slightly, as if touching my skin might somehow taint him. Sucking him. "Robert, it's been a long time. How are you?" "Fine, thanks," I said. "I heard you got a promotion. Congratulations." "Yes, I'm managing director now," he said with ill-concealed pride. "You know, the company appreciates my services. Last quarter, I brought in a client who increased our portfolio by 30%. "Impressive," I said. "And we bought a new house in Chevy Chase," Prudence added. "A real mansion. You'd love it, Robert. Such high ceilings, marble floors." "Sounds great," I said, feeling the irritation building inside me. Luckily, Vanessa and Philip appeared at that moment. My daughter looked elegant in a dark blue dress that I was sure cost a fortune. Philippe was impeccable as always in a gray suit and blue tie. "Daddy!" Vanessa came over and kissed me on the cheek. "Troy, did you get here early?" "I'm on time," I said. "Just like you asked." "And this?" She looked at my suit. "What did you decide to wear?" "My suit is perfectly fine, Vanessa." She sighed but didn't pursue the subject further. Instead, she turned to the Quinlanes and began exchanging pleasantries with them. Philip nodded at me, then joined Hubert and Quentin's conversation about some stocks and investments. I sat in silence, feeling like a stranger at this celebration of life. They were talking about things that didn't interest me: new restaurants, fancy resorts, exclusive clubs. I could afford all of these things, but I chose not to spend money on ostentatious luxury. Somehow it made me look pathetic rather than wise in their eyes. At 6:50, Lawrence and Eleanor arrived. My grandson looked grown up in a dark suit with neatly styled hair. Eleanor was impeccable as always. Cream dress, pearl earrings, perfect makeup. "Grandfather," Lawrence came over and gave me a hug. "Thank you for coming." "I wouldn't have missed your birthday," I said, patting him on the back. Eleanor came up next. Her smile froze when she saw my costume. "Robert," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "Did you get my gift?" "Yes, thank you, Eleanor." I held out the bouquet to her. "This is for you." "How nice," and she said, accepting the flowers. Her eyes said, "It would be even nicer if you wore the suit I bought you." Everyone took their seats. I found myself between Vanessa and Lawrence across from Eleanor, the perfect position to observe everything that was going on at the table. The waiter brought the menu, and the conversation died down for a while everyone studied the food list. No prices were listed, a sure sign of an expensive restaurant. "If you're asking the price, you can't afford it," as Hubert was fond of saying. I sat watching this company and felt increasingly out of place. My old suit, my simple manners, my unwillingness to participate in this parade of vanity, all of it made me an outsider. Several times I caught glances from other visitors, and it seemed to me that they were looking at me with the same condescension as the Quinlan family. The tension was building by the minute. I could physically feel it, a heaviness in my chest, a lump in my throat. The evening was just beginning, and I was already wishing it would end soon. Dinner began with champagne and toast. Hubert was the first to raise his glass, making a pompous speech about how proud he was of his son-in-law and how pleased he was to welcome him to the 30-year-old club. Everyone clinked glasses. I took a sip, watching Lawrence. My grandson was smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked like an actor playing the part of a happy birthday boy. "Your toast, Robert?" Eleanor asked when everyone else had already spoken. I raised my glass slowly. "To Lawrence, that you always remember who you are, even when life tries to make you forget." There was a brief silence. Lawrence looked at me with slight confusion, then nodded. "Thank you, grandfather." Eleanor quickly turned the conversation to the menu. Tonight was tasting night, which meant a fixed set of dishes. 6 changes, each with a matched wine. The first appetizer was served, something resembling a work of art. Thin slices of raw fish decorated with microgreens and dots of colorful sauces. Scallop carpaccio with lime aioli and reduced balsamic cream, the waiter announced in a French accent. I looked at the tiny portion. At my restaurant, such a dish would be twice as big and cost half as much. But I remained silent and began to eat. Delicious, isn't it? Beatrice said, turning to me. Such a fine balance of flavors. It's not bad, I replied. Not enough sauce, though. Beatrice looked as if I had said something indecent. Oh, Robert, you have such, special taste. The conversation at the table broke into groups. Hubert, Quentin, and Philip were discussing some new tax incentive for investors. Beatrice and Prudence were comparing interior designers. Vanessa and Eleanor were talking about vacation plans. Lawrence shifted his gaze from one group to another, inserting remarks where he thought appropriate. I ate in silence, feeling as if I were at a performance. I was a spectator, not a participant. No one asked my opinion. No one addressed me except the occasional, "Don't you think so, Robert?" or "What do you think, Robert?" which were pure formality. The second course change, wild mushroom soup with truffle oil, brought a new wave of raves from the Quinlan family. The texture is divine, Prudence marveled, like velvet. Truffle from Perigord, Hubert said knowingly. Beatrice and I were there last year. Wonderful region. Do you travel, Robert? Quentin asked with a slight chuckle, as if he knew the answer in advance. I used to travel a good deal, I replied. Lizzie and I traveled halfway around the world. You did? Quentin looked surprised. Where have you been? Italy, France, Japan, Thailand, Morocco? Just to name a few on a long list. My wife and I studied the culinary traditions of different peoples. How informative, Prudence said in a tone that made it clear she found it boring. Quentin and I prefer resorts. You know, 5-star hotels, spas, high-end service. We went to the Maldives last month. It was heavenly. To each his own, I said. The third change, ravioli with ricotta and spinach and sage oil, was an excuse for Eleanor to talk about renovating her and Lawrence's house. We're completely remodeling the kitchen, she announced, addressing the entire table. Italian marble for the countertops, top-of-the-line appliances. The cabinets were ordered from the craftsman who made furniture for that famous TV chef. Sounds impressive, Beatrice said. And expensive. What can you do? Eleanor shrugged gracefully. Quality requires investment. I always say it's better to have less stuff but better quality. I agree, Quentin agreed. Our new house cost a fortune, but every penny was worth it. As they say, a house is a reflection of its owner. In that case, I interjected, my old house shows that I value substance over form. There was an awkward pause. Eleanor was the first to break the silence. Robert, no one is saying there's anything wrong with your house. It's nice. It's just that, you know, at your age, you might want to consider something a little more comfortable and safe. At my age, I repeated. Eleanor, I'm 68, not 98. I'm perfectly capable of running my own house. Of course you are, she said quickly. I'm just worried about you. We all worry, don't we, Lawrence? My grandson, caught off guard, nodded with an uncertain expression. Grandfather knows what he's doing, he said diplomatically. Of course, Eleanor agreed, but her tone said otherwise. It's just that sometimes people need help to see the wider possibilities. The fourth change, Dorado filet with white wine and caper sauce, brought a temporary truce. Everyone was busy eating and discussing the nuances of flavor. I had to admit that the dish was masterfully prepared, although personally I would have added more fresh herbs. The fifth change, veal medallions with truffled mashed potatoes and caramelized vegetables, came just in time to prevent my sharp response after another condescending comment from Beatrice about my unusual taste. But the tension at the table was building. I could see Vanessa fidgeting nervously with her napkin, Lawrence avoiding my eyes. Divine, Beatrice announced, tasting the veal. It just melts in your mouth. I agree, Prudence agreed. Worth every penny. Speaking of pennies, Eleanor said, and I felt my insides tighten. Robert, Have you decided what to do with the suit I gave you? I have, I answered calmly. It's hanging in the closet. But you haven't worn it, she remarked. Non, Badu. I preferred my old one. It looks rather worn, she said, eyeing my suit critically, especially the cuffs. But it's comfortable, and he and I have a lot of memories in common. Memories are fine, Beatrice interjected, but sometimes you have to move on. Upgrade. Especially when finances allow, Quentin added. And if they don't, well, we're always happy to help. Right, Prudence? Of course, Prudence said with a smile that made my jaw drop. Robert, if you need help updating your closet or, say, buying a new car to replace that old, what's its name? Ford? Quentin and I would be happy to be supportive. I felt myself blush, not with embarrassment, but with anger. Thank you, but I'm doing quite well financially. Of course, Prudence said as if she were talking to a child. Just making a suggestion. Not everyone needs the latest fashions and designer clothes, I pointed out. Of course not, Eleanor agreed. But you must agree, Robert. There's a difference between modesty and, how should I put it? Poverty? Prudence suggested, and they both laughed. There was silence at the table. I saw Lawrence tense, Vanessa pale. Even Hubert looked slightly embarrassed by his daughter's bluntness. What Prudence means, Eleanor said quickly, is that there is no shame in living within one's means. But there is also no shame in accepting help from family when it is offered from the heart. And what is the price of that help? I asked quietly. I beg your pardon? Eleanor looked puzzled. I'm asking what the price is, because every kind of help has a price, especially the kind that's offered from the heart. Robert, you've got it all wrong, Beatrice said. No one meant you any offense. Really? I looked around the table. I think this whole evening has been devoted to emphasizing how far below your standards I am. My house is too old, my car too modest, my suit not fancy enough. And apparently I'm too poor to change all that. At that moment, a waiter came to our table with a tray with 6 dessert plates on it. Chocolate ganache with raspberry coulis and mint sorbet, he announced, setting the plates down. I watched as everyone shifted their attention back to dessert in relief, glad for the opportunity to change the subject. But at that moment, another person came to our table. A tall man in an impeccable suit, the manager of the restaurant, according to his badge. Good evening, he said with a professional smile. I hope you are enjoying your dinner? Everything is just perfect, Beatrice replied. Compliments to the chef. I'll pass it on, the manager said, then turned to me. Minus Mr. Abbott, I didn't expect to see you tonight. You didn't tell me you were coming. I felt all eyes at the table turn to me. Good evening, Colin, I said. I'm here unofficially. Family dinner. Colin looked slightly embarrassed. Of course he was, but I should have known. We could have had your usual table ready. It's fine, I assured him. Service is top-notch as always. Thank you, sir. Colin looked flattered. Awaito, if you need anything special, just let me know. Thank you, Colin. The manager nodded and left. There was dead silence at the table. I turned slowly to the family. They all had the same look of bewilderment and shock on their faces. Grandfather? Lawrence was the first to break the silence. Do you know the manager of Azura? Yes, I said. Colin worked for me as a maitre d' at the 7th Heaven for 5 years before moving here. You? Eleanor asked. What do you mean, you? I looked at her, then looked around at the rest of the family. It means I own the 7th Heaven, as well as Riviera, Provence, Little Italy, and Spice Garden. 5 restaurants in and around New Carrollton. The silence was deafening. I saw Prudence open and close her mouth without making a sound. Quentin looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Beatrice and Hubert froze with the same look of disbelief on their faces. It's impossible, Eleanor said at last. You said you had a little cafe. I did, I confirmed. 35 years ago. A lot has changed since then. But you live like this. She didn't finish the sentence. Modestly? I suggested it. Yes, that's my choice. I prefer to invest in what's important, not in ostentatious luxury. Is the 7th Heaven the restaurant on Maple Street? Hubert asked. The one with the Michelin star? Yes, I confirmed. But this restaurant costs... Hubert stopped, realizing the tactlessness of the question. Enough for me to update my closet without anyone else's help, I finished for him, and buy a new car, and move into a mansion in Chevy Chase if I wanted to. But I don't. Vanessa looked at me wide-eyed. Daddy, why didn't you ever say... About what, Vanessa? How much I'm worth? Does it matter? Of course it matters, she exclaimed. We thought you were barely making ends meet in retirement. And that's why you were all so condescending to me? I asked. Because you thought I was a poor old man? Not condescending, Eleanor protested. Anifrim, we were just worried about you. No, Eleanor, I objected. You weren't worried. You were ashamed. Ashamed of my old house, my old car, my old suit. Because they didn't fit your idea of what a successful man should look like. I stayed up all night after dinner going over the expressions on the Quinlan family's faces when they learned the truth. Shock, disbelief, and then, most disgusting of all, sudden respect. It was as if a switch had been flipped on. 1 minute they were looking at me with pity, the next they were looking at me with reverence. Nothing about me had changed, the same old suit, the same humble appearance, the same values. Only their perception of my financial situation had changed. In the morning, I was awakened by a phone call. Hubert Quinlan's name popped up on the screen. I was surprised we had never communicated directly without Eleanor or Lawrence mediating. Good morning, Robert. His voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. I hope I didn't wake you. No, I was up a long time ago, I lied, glancing at my watch. It was only 7 in the morning. Good. Listen, Robert, I'm calling to personally apologize for the incident yesterday. My daughter and son-in-law's behavior was unacceptable. I remained silent, giving him the opportunity to continue. We were all shocked to learn of your situation, Hubert continued. But that doesn't excuse our previous attitude. We should have treated you with respect, regardless of your financial status. Indeed, I said dryly. I would like to make it up to you, Hubert continued. Perhaps you'd like to have dinner with us next weekend, in a relaxed, family-only setting. Beatrice insists. Hubert, I said slowly, I wasn't good enough for your company yesterday. What has changed today? Robert, you misunderstand. We've always considered you part of the family. No, Hubert, you thought of me as an inconvenient relative to be put up with for Lawrence's sake. If it weren't for yesterday's revelation, you wouldn't be calling me now. Oh, it's not fair, his voice grew colder. I'm sincerely trying to mend the relationship. Sincerely? I couldn't hold back a bitter chuckle. You never showed any interest in connecting with me until you found out I owned 5 restaurants. There was a pause. Robert, I understand your irritation, but people change, and so do opinions. Maybe last night has opened our eyes to what a successful man you really are. A successful man. Here it is. Successful in his mind meant rich. Nothing personal, no human qualities, just money. Thank you for the invitation, Hubert, but I must decline. I have other plans. I understand, his voice became distant again. Maybe some other time. Maybe, I replied, knowing it wouldn't happen. After I talked to Hubert, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head. It was a sunny day, and the park where I was headed was full of people. Young moms with strollers, older couples, teenagers on skateboards. Everyone was enjoying the nice weather. I found a vacant bench and sat down, watching the life around me. The phone rang again. This time it was Prudence. Robert, she exclaimed with exaggerated joy. I'm so glad I got through. I wanted to apologize for last night. Hannah, Prudence, I interrupted. Let's dispense with the fake apology. We both know you've never considered me an equal, and nothing has changed since last night. How can you say that? There was a hint of resentment in her voice. I've always treated you with respect. Have you? What about the poverty joke? Was that a sign of respect? Oh, Robert, that was just a bad joke. I didn't know you were so, sensitive. This isn't about sensitivity, Prudence. It's about basic politeness. But don't worry, I don't hold it against you. I just prefer to hang out with people who appreciate me for who I am, not the size of my bank account. But Robert, that's exactly what I'm doing, she protested. Look, I called to invite you to dinner at our new house. Quentin will be very happy to show you his wine collection. He has a few bottles that might interest you. What makes you think I'm interested in Quentin's wines? Well, you own restaurants, right? I thought, you thought we had a common interest now that I was richer than you thought. Robert, you're making this so complicated. I just want to be friendly. Thank you for the invitation, Prudence, but I must decline. I already have plans. I disconnected the phone and sat for a while, staring at the pond in front of me. Ducks floated lazily on the water, begging for bread from the park visitors. A simple picture, but so peaceful. Lizzie loved this park. We often came here together, sitting on this very bench, talking about everything in the world. What would you do, Lizzie? I asked mentally. I could almost hear her answer. Robert, don't let bitterness poison your heart. But don't let people use you either. Wise Lizzie always struck a balance between forgiveness and self-respect. When I got home, there was a surprise waiting for me on the doorstep. Lawrence was sitting on the porch steps. He looked tired, as if he too had been up all night. Grandpa, he came up to meet me. I called, but you didn't answer. I turned off the phone. Too many suddenly interested relatives. Lawrence smiled guiltily. Yes, that's what I thought. Can I come in? I opened the door and we walked into the kitchen. I put the kettle on and took out 2 mugs. We were silent while I made the tea. Finally, Lawrence spoke. Grandfather, I must apologize. For what, my boy? For not stopping Eleanor and the others yesterday. For letting them look down on you all these years. I sat down across from him, placing a mug of tea in front of him. You're not responsible for other people's actions, Lawrence. But I could have stood up for you. I should have. I looked at my grandson carefully. Lawrence, you knew about my restaurants, didn't you? He lowered his eyes. Yes, since college. I happened to see some papers when I was helping you sort through some old papers. Then I Googled it and put 2 and 2 together. And you didn't tell anyone? You've always been secretive about your business. I figured you had your reasons for not publicizing your success. And that was, the right thing to do. The way you live by your values, not by society's expectations. I felt a surge of pride in my grandson. Despite the influence of Eleanor and her family, he still had the values that Lizzie and I had tried to instill in him. Thank you for respecting my choice, I said. I'm sorry about last night, Lawrence continued. Eleanor was up all night. She's afraid you hate her. I don't hate Eleanor, Lawrence. I just saw the real her. And her family, too. They're not bad people, grandfather. They're just, superficial. I know they are, and it's their choice. But that doesn't mean I have to accept it. Lawrence was silent for a moment, then asked, What now? What do you mean? Will you still be part of the family? Will you still come to dinners, holidays? I wondered. I didn't want to lose touch with my grandson, but the thought of sitting at the same table with the Quinlans again was repugnant. I'll always be happy to see you, Lawrence, and Vanessa, but with Eleanor's family, I need time. I understand, he nodded. Eleanor isn't really that bad, you know. She just grew up in a certain environment, with certain values. We all make choices about what values to follow, Lawrence, even if we grew up with them. I know, he sighed. I'm working on it. With her. We finished our tea in comfortable silence. Then Lawrence stood up. I've got to go. Eleanor's waiting. Of course. Grandfather, he paused at the door. You're not going to cut us out of your life, are you? No, my boy. Never you. After Lawrence left, I sat in my chair for a long time, thinking about our conversation. I was glad that there was still a connection between us. Lawrence had always been a special kid, sensitive, thoughtful. It was a shame that he had allowed himself to become immersed in Eleanor's world of material possessions, but perhaps not all was lost. Around noon, the phone rang. Vanessa. Daddy, her voice sounded strained. Can we talk? Of course, daughter. Can I come over? Alone, without Philip. I'll be waiting. 40 minutes later, Vanessa was at my place. She looked unusually vulnerable, without her usual gloss. She sat on the couch, nervously fiddling with the strap of her designer handbag. Daddy, I need to know why you've been hiding your success from us all these years. I sat across from her. Why did I have to tell you? Because we're family, she exclaimed. Families don't keep secrets like that from each other. Secrets? Vanessa, it wasn't a secret. I just didn't publicize my financial situation. If you had ever asked me directly about my business, I would have answered honestly. But you always made it seem like you were barely making ends meet. I never said that. You drew that conclusion yourself based on my lifestyle. Vanessa thought for a moment. But why live so modestly if you can afford more? Because more doesn't always mean better, Vanessa. I'm comfortable in my house. I love my old car. I don't need designer things to feel accomplished. But you could help us, she suddenly blurted out. When Philip and I bought the house, we had to take out a huge mortgage. You could have helped, but instead you pretended you didn't have any extra money. That's it. Money, always money. Shukshorninum. I didn't offer help because you didn't ask for it, I replied calmly. Besides, Philip always prided himself on providing for his family. Would he accept my money? Vanessa blushed. That's different. You're a father. Parents help their children. I helped you get an education, Vanessa. I was there for you when you started your career. But I don't feel it's my responsibility to fund the lifestyle you and Philip have chosen, especially when you both make excellent money. It's not just about money, she said, though her tone said otherwise. It's about trust. You didn't trust us enough to tell us the truth. Did you trust me enough to respect my choice to live the way I want to live? Or were you constantly trying to improve me? New clothes, new car, new house. Vanessa was silent, avoiding my gaze. I've loved you and supported you all your life, Vanessa, I continued more gently. But in recent years, I've felt that you've been ashamed of me, my humble lifestyle, my old-fashioned views, like I was some uncomfortable reminder of a past you wanted to forget. That's not true, she protested, but without much conviction. No? When was the last time you invited me to dinner with your new friends? When was the last time you proudly introduced me as your father instead of apologizing for my appearance? Tears came to her eyes. I didn't mean for you to feel that way. It's just, the world has changed, Dad. Everyone's judged by looks, by status. I wanted to protect you from those judgments. Or protect yourself from the awkwardness of being associated with me. Vanessa didn't answer, and that was more eloquent than any words. I sighed. Homatum. Vanessa, I'm not mad at you. I'm just disappointed that money and status have become more important to you than sincerity and acceptance. What's going to happen now? She asked quietly. Will you cut us out of your life? No, of course not. You are my daughter and I will always love you. But I hope this situation will make you think about what's really important in life. We talked for another hour. Vanessa cried, apologized, promised to change. I listened, comforted, but deep down I realized that some things don't change that quickly. Years spent chasing status and approval from a certain circle of people had left their mark. But at least she was trying. When Vanessa left, I felt strangely devastated. I had talked to more family members in one day than I had in the past few months. And it was all about money. Not because of caring, not because of love. Because of the sudden discovery that the old man in the shabby suit was richer than they thought. In the evening, there was another call. Eleanor. I almost didn't pick up the phone, but then I decided it was better to end it all at once. Robert, her voice sounded unusually timid. I'm calling to apologize for yesterday. I'm listening, I said neutrally. My behavior had been inexcusable. Yeah, we were all shocked to learn of your present situation, and it changed your attitude towards me. Yes, she answered with unexpected honesty. But not in the way you think. I've always respected you, Robert. I just thought you were stuck in the past, that you needed help adjusting to the modern world. Now I realize that your lifestyle is a conscious choice, not a necessity. And does that make a difference? Yeah, she said honestly again. It makes me respect your choices rather than trying to change them. Because now you know that I can afford anything, but I choose to live modestly. Partly, she admitted after a pause, but also because I've seen your integrity. You live according to your values, even if they go against the conventional wisdom. That's impressive. I didn't know whether to believe her. Eleanor was always a good manipulator, but something in her voice sounded sincere. Thank you for apologizing, Eleanor. I appreciate your honesty. Will you forgive us? Will you give us a second chance? Time will tell, I replied, but I don't hold a grudge. After my conversation with Eleanor, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at Lizzie's picture. The events of the past 2 days had made me rethink a lot of things. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my will. I reread the document that had been drawn up years ago. According to it, my entire estate was to be divided equally between Vanessa and Lawrence. A simple, fair decision. But now I wondered, was it fair? Do my children and grandson really need this money? Or will they simply reinforce the materialistic values that have already taken over their lives? I remembered Pax Holloway, who had worked with me for over 20 years. He knew the business like the back of his hand, put his soul into it, and he never tried to suck up to me because of my position. To him, I was always just Robert, his friend and partner. I picked up a pen and started taking notes. A new will. Vanessa and Lawrence will get a share, of course. They're my family, but not all of them. Pax deserved to be the full owner of the business he actually already ran, and some of the funds could be used for something really worthwhile. The decision has been made. Tomorrow I'll call my lawyer and set up a meeting. It was time to get my affairs in order. Not because I was going to die anytime soon, but because I wanted to make sure my legacy would serve the values I had believed in all my life. The law office of Whitman and Price was located in an old red brick building in downtown New Carrollton. I drove there at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in my old Ford. The receptionist, a young woman with a neat lock of hair, recognized me and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Abbott. Mr. Whitman is expecting you." Jeremiah Whitman has been my lawyer for the past 20 years. A tall, thin man with a neatly trimmed gray beard, he met me at the door of his office. "Robert, good to see you." We shook hands. "What can I do for you?" "You sounded, forceful." "I'd like to review the will, Jeremiah." He pointed me to a chair and sat at a solid oak desk. "I see. What changes would you like to make?" I pulled from my pocket the list I'd made the night before. "First, I want to sell the 2 restaurants, Provence and Little Italy. Business is going well there, and we can get a good price." Jeremiah raised his eyebrows but said nothing, making notes in his notebook. "So, secondly," I continued, "the other 3 restaurants I want to put Pax Holloway in charge. 70% of the shares to him, 30% to be split between Vanessa and Lawrence." "That's pretty generous for Pax," Jeremiah said. "Though I have to admit, he's really put his heart into your business." "He deserves it," I said firmly. "Sir, Pax knows restaurants better than anyone else, including myself at the moment. He'll keep what Lizzie and I have built up over the years." "And the money from the sale of the restaurants?" "I'll keep some of it, for travel and new projects. Another portion will go into a trust that will provide an allowance for my daughter Vanessa, but a small one so she can't use it to support her overly lavish lifestyle. The rest goes to Lawrence, but on the condition that he has access to the funds only after he divorces Eleanor." Jeremiah looked at me in surprise. "Are you sure about that last point? It could cause problems." "I know," I replied, "and I don't expect Lawrence will ever get that money. It will probably stay in a trust and eventually go to charity, but I want him to have a choice." Jeremiah nodded, making notes. "What about the house and personal effects?" "I'll leave the house to Lawrence. No strings attached. It's the only thing he'll get unconditionally. I hope that someday he'll remember how much he loved this house as a child, before Eleanor and her family convinced him that success was measured in square meters and marble countertops." "I see." Jeremiah finished taking notes and looked up. "Robert, I've known you for years. This is a rather drastic change to the previous will. Are you sure you've thought it through?" I nodded. "The events of the last few days have made me rethink a lot of things. I don't want my money to reinforce the very values I find destructive: materialism, superficiality, judging a person by their condition. If my loved ones only value me for my wallet, why make that wallet even fatter after I'm dead?" "I see." Jeremiah rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Kaktaram. You know, many rich people face this dilemma. Money can be both a blessing and a curse for the next generation." "Exactly," I smiled sadly. "Lizzie always said that money is like a magnifying glass. It makes good people better and bad people worse. It just reinforces what's already inside." "She was a wise woman," Jeremiah nodded. "Okay, I'll have the paperwork ready by the end of the week." "What about selling the restaurants? Do you want me to contact potential buyers?" "Yes, please. I have a few contacts who might be interested. I'll forward the information to you." We discussed a few more legal details, after which I said goodbye to Jeremiah and went outside. The day was cool but sunny. I decided not to go straight home, but to take a walk around the city center. A strange feeling of lightness filled me after talking to the lawyer. It was as if I had dropped a heavy load that I didn't even realize I was carrying. On my way out, I stopped by a travel agency. The young woman behind the counter smiled welcomingly at me. "What can I do for you, sir?" "I'd like to inquire about tours to Japan. I've always wanted to go back there." "Of course, we have some great suggestions. Are you traveling alone or with your family?" "Alone," I answered, and for the first time that thought didn't make me sad. "But I hope to make new friends along the way." She showed me several brochures with different itineraries. I chose a 2-week tour that included not only the popular tourist spots, but also visits to remote villages with their authentic cuisine. It was the kind of trip Lizzie and I had always dreamed of doing together. "When would you like to go?" the counselor asked. I thought for a moment. "As soon as the paperwork was ready. Say a month from now?" "Great. I'll see what dates are available." Walking out of the agency with the brochures and pre-booking, I felt a surge of energy. For the first time in a long time, I was planning something purely for myself, without looking back at family expectations or business commitments. The next stop was Pax's office. It was located above 7th Heaven, in a small but cozy space overlooking New Carrollton's Main Street. Pax was sitting at his computer when I walked in, and his face broke into a smile. "Robert, what a surprise. I thought we were meeting next week to discuss quarterly reports." "Change of plans, Pax," I said, sitting down across from him. "I have a serious conversation to have with you." His smile changed to a concerned expression. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing bad," I hurried to reassure him. "It's just that I've made some important decisions, and I wanted to discuss them with you personally." I told him of my intention to sell the 2 restaurants and put the management of the remaining 3 in his hands with majority ownership. Pax listened with increasing amazement, and when I finished, he just sat there with his mouth open. Por favor. "Robert, are you serious? That's too generous." "Not at all." I shook my head. "You deserve it, Pax. For the last 10 years, you've basically run the whole business while I've been enjoying my so-called retirement. You've put as much heart into these restaurants as I once did. But still, 70%? He shook his head. "What about your family? Your daughter? Your grandson?" "They'll get their share," I said. But to be honest, Pax, Vanessa, and Lawrence have never shown any real interest in the restaurant business. For them, it's just a source of income. And for you, it's life, just like it was for me once. Pax thought for a moment, then looked at me seriously. "Was it because of that dinner?" "Lawrence told me what happened." I sighed. "Partly. That dinner was the catalyst, made me see things I'd been ignoring for a long time. But the decision had been ripe for a long time. I'm getting older, Pax. I want to make sure my life's work is in good hands." He nodded silently, then held out his hand. "I won't let you down, Robert." "I know," I shook his hand. "That's why I made this decision." We talked for another hour or so, going over the details of the transfer of control and my plans for the future. Pax was excited about the prospect of becoming the majority owner of the business, but also expressed concern about my decision to travel alone. "Robert, are you sure you want to go to Japan alone?" "At your age," "At my age," but I interrupted. "People either start living life to the fullest or die slowly, trapped inside 4 walls. I choose the former." Pax laughed. "You've always been stubborn." "Okay, but at least keep me informed of your adventures." "I promise," I smiled. "And maybe I'll even bring you some new recipes for restaurants." The next few weeks flew by in a flurry of activity. Jeremiah prepared all the paperwork, and I officially signed the new will. We found buyers for Provence and Little Italy, a young couple of restaurateurs from Boston who wanted to expand their business. I liked their approach and enthusiasm, and they reminded me of Lizzie and me when we were young. The deal was done quickly and on favorable terms. Suddenly, I found myself with a significant amount of money and complete freedom of action. It was a heady feeling. I decided not to inform my family of my decisions. At least not yet. The calls from Eleanor and her parents gradually stopped when it became clear that I had no desire to resume close relations with them. Vanessa called regularly, and I sensed that she was sincere in her efforts to reconnect with me. though sometimes her voice had a hint of the old materialism. Lawrence came by once a week, sometimes alone, sometimes with Eleanor, who was now emphatically polite and attentive, though I noticed her wrinkle as she entered my modest home. A week before I left for Japan, I invited Lawrence to dinner. Just him, without Eleanor. We sat on the veranda enjoying the warm spring day, and I told him about my plans. Japan? Lawrence looked surprised. Alone? Yes, my boy. I've long dreamed of going back there. Your grandmother and I have been to Tokyo and Kyoto, but we've always wanted to see more remote places. This is unexpected, he said carefully. But it's great. Just be careful, okay? Japan is a very different culture, a different language. Lawrence, I interrupted him gently, I traveled half the world before you were even alive. I'll manage somehow. He smiled embarrassedly. I'm sorry, grandfather. Sometimes I forget how experienced you really are. Experienced. No wonder, I said without reproach. I've led a rather monotonous life for the last few years. And now you've decided to change that? Exactly, I nodded. Life is too short to put dreams on hold. It's one of the lessons I learned after your grandmother died, but I seem to have forgotten for a while. Lawrence looked thoughtfully at his plate. Grandfather, may I ask, does this have something to do with that dinner? With what Eleanor said? Partly, I admit. That night made me think about what's really important in life and how much time I'd spent worrying about the opinions of people who really only cared about my bank account. Eleanor isn't like that, Lawrence objected, but without much conviction. She's just grew up in a certain environment. Maybe, I didn't argue. Sonorum. Anyway, I don't blame Eleanor or anyone else. Everyone is entitled to their own values. It's just that mine are very different from yours. Lawrence was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, You know, sometimes I think you're right, that all these things, status, money, they don't make us happier. They just give us the illusion of security. That's a wise observation, I said, feeling a glimmer of hope. Maybe all is not lost for my grandson. When will you be back? He asked, changing the subject. In 3 weeks. But that's just the beginning. I have big plans, Lawrence. I've always wanted to see New Zealand and go back to Morocco and maybe finally visit South America. Lawrence's eyes widened. Are you seriously going to travel all over the world? At your age? Why wouldn't I? I smiled. I'm in great shape for my age, and I want to make up for lost time. My grandson shook his head with an expression of surprise, and, I thought, slight envy. You're an amazing man, Grandpa. Just a man who has finally decided to live the way he wants to live, not the way others expect him to live. Our conversation turned to other topics, but I could see that Lawrence was impressed with my decision. Maybe my example would make him think about his own life and whether the path he had chosen with Eleanor really led to true happiness. 3 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of a small ryokan in a mountain village in Nagano Prefecture. The view of the valley and distant mountains was breathtaking. Sitting next to me were Emi and Takeshi, an older American-Japanese couple I had met on the tour. We quickly found common ground and decided to extend the trip together after the main group returned to Tokyo. Robert, is this letter from your grandson? Amy asked, nodding at the clipboard in my hands. Yes, I smiled. Lawrence writes that he and Eleanor have taken a break. He's moved into a separate apartment and is thinking about what he really wants out of life. Your example seems to have inspired him, Takeshi remarked, pouring tea for all of us. I hope so, I said. Lawrence is a good guy. Just spent too long trying to live up to other people's expectations. Like a lot of us, Amy nodded. It took me 50 years to stop worrying about what other people thought. It took me 68, I laughed. But better late than never, right? We sat in cozy silence, enjoying the moment. In the past 3 months, I'd traveled to places I'd only read about, tasted dishes I'd never even heard of, and met people who were closer to many old acquaintances. People who saw me simply as Robert, not a rich restaurateur, not a poor retiree, but a man with stories, experience, and a heart. I looked at the mountains in the distance and thought of Lizzie. She would approve of my decisions. She always said life is too short to waste it on people who don't appreciate you for who you are. My phone beeped, a text from Pax with a picture. He was standing in front of Seventh Heaven, with a smile up to his ears, and a Best Restaurant of the Year plaque in his hands. I smiled. Business was booming in his hands, just as I'd expected. Another message was from Vanessa. She wrote that she and Philip had decided to sell their big house and move to something more modest. "You were right, Dad. That house never made us happier, only made us work harder to pay the mortgage." I put the phone away and took a sip of tea. Life was going on with unexpected twists and turns and discoveries. Who knew that at 68 I would start a new chapter filled with adventure and real connections? "What are you thinking about, Robert?" Amy asked. "About life," I replied, "and how sometimes you have to lose something to find something much more valuable." "Wise word," Takeshi nodded. "And now shall we try the local sake that our host told us about? They say it's been made here for 300 years. "I'd love to," I smiled. I was open to new experiences. And it was true.